There's a group of organisms that were...
Come on, bring back the seagulls.
There's a group of organisms that we're going to have a look at today that have been around on the planet for over 500 million years. They occur almost everywhere. There are about 10,000 species in the world and over 800 species in South Africa. But they actually don't get a lot of good press. And in fact, some people are quite grossed out about them. So let's go and see if we can find some.
Okay, I'm intrigued, let's go.
Oh, whoa. Matt, have a look at this one. We've got an absolute monster here. Look at this guy. Whoa. Look at the size of him. So this is our animal. These are Polychaete worms. And Polychaete worms are not the same as the earthworms that you get in the garden. The earthworms you get in your garden, terrestrial worms, are oligochaete worms. Oligo means few and chaete means hair, so they have few hairs on them. So they're very smooth-bodied. But the polychaete worms, which is the type that you get in the sea, have many hairs. Poly meaning many and chaete meaning hairs. So these have got appendages on every segment, and some of them can be in fact very beautiful, as we'll see in a moment.
Some hairy worms.
So these are the hairy worms.
The wonderful world.
The wonderful world of hairy worms. So each worm consists of a head with a mouth, and in this case with big biting jaws, which can actually give you quite an injury, and then a variable number of repetitive segments. So they rather remind me of a train. It has a locomotive at the front, which is the head of the worm, from which the whole structure is driven, and which has the sense organs in it, and it has the power in it, and then a whole lot of repeated segments that are very similar to one another. So they're like the carriages of a train, and they can be a very variable number of segments. They can be only 10 or 20 segments, or like in this worm, there can be over 100.
Yeah, looks like hundreds.
And each one of those segments is an independent unit. It's barriered off from the segments in front of it and behind it. And then it's got its own limbs, it's got its own gills, it's got its own gonads, it's got its own kidneys, and just the sort of blood system and gut run down the center, again, a bit like the corridor down the center of a train, that carry the food from the head right down to the end and to the anus at the back end. And one of the implications of that is that the worm can lose some of the units and then just grow them back again. So the worms actually break very easily, but the head end of it can grow a new tail. That tail can't grow a new head, but the head can grow a new tail.
So if someone nips the bum off this one, then it'll just grow a
so
new...
if this breaks in half, it'll just grow a new back half. And quite often you see ones with a replacement, like little miniature back half to them.
And there's quite a few things which eat them, right?
So these are very much collected by anglers for bait, and they would be very good food for a fish. But it'd have to be quite a fair-sized fish to tackle this one. So this is the largest polychaete worm that we get in South Africa. In fact, it's the largest one in the world. They grow to over 1.5 meters in length. So it's called the wonder worm, and you can see it's a wonderful animal, all beautifully iridescent.
It looks like its mouth has got some grabby bits. What is it catching?
So it has, at the mouth end, there's some tentacles, which are sensory, and then it's got some very powerful jaws. These worms are predatory, so some of the larger ones actually live in the sediment and then stick their head out and grab fish and eat them.
What?
They call them bobbit worms in Australia, and you can see some video on the web of them actually capturing fish out of the water. But these ones, slightly smaller ones here, would eat small crustaceans, little amphipods and shrimps and so on.
It's a little bit Stranger Things, this.
Yeah, like something out of a science fiction movie, aren't they?
Or horror film.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying learning about these amazing worms, then hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it makes the world of difference to us. And we'll keep making more Explore the Shore episodes like this one. Deal?
The 800 species of polychaete worm that we get in South Africa are divided into two main groups. The one is called the errant polychaetes, so those are the ones that go out on errands. So it's an easy word to remember, the ones that get up and move around. So the wonder worm that we've looked at is a fantastic example of an errant polychaete, one that gets up, moves around and hunts its prey. The other group of polychaetes are called the sedentary polychaetes, and as the name suggests, they're very sedentary. They just plonk down in front of the TV and wait for the food to come.
Wait for their TV dinner.
Wait for their TV dinners to arrive. So they don't move around, they live in tubes, which they very often construct themselves, and then they often put out sticky appendages into the water and then collect things that are floating past and then bring them back to the mouth. So the worm itself doesn't move, it just emerges from its tube, puts out its appendages and then collects the food and brings them back to the mouth.
Sorry, can I just get you being a sedentary worm again, please?
Yeah, okay.
Great. Thank you for that illustration.
So a great example of a sedentary worm is the Cape reef worm. The Cape reef worm actually makes enormous round boulder-like reefs on sandy shores. So it's an ecosystem engineer, a bit like coral. It creates its own habitat, which then all sorts of other organisms live within. If we take a closer look at the reef worm, then the head has like a little trapdoor of very thick, heavy chaete. So it's like burglar bars over the entrance. And then behind that, it's got some gills, which it uses to filter food particles and sand from the water. It then uses the sand particles to make and expand the reef and the tube and the food particles it eats. So one of the interesting things about living in a closed-end tube like this, you have to have your head out the front to catch the food, and then your bum is at the bottom of the tube, and if you poop there, then you're going to poop into your own lounge. So this worm has a very interesting adaptation to prevent that, in that the back half of the animal has become very narrow and is folded into a little groove along the animal's stomach and chest, and then protrudes just under its chin. So it can poop out under its chin and back into the water column again, so it doesn't foul its own home. Another of the more common and more spectacular sedentary worms is the plume worm or Christmas tree worm. It actually is a very fat little worm, and then from its head it extends two big crowns of tentacles, and these are held out into the water column like little Christmas trees. And they come in beautiful colors. You can get white ones, blue ones, purple ones, pink ones, and yellow ones. And you often see them in crevices like this. So there's a beautiful one underneath this rock here. If you cast a shadow over them, or if you touch them, then they whip their tentacles back into the tube again, and then wait for you to go away, and then slowly extend them out again. If you look at sheets of coralline algae, or if you look at the surfaces of the shells of gastropod mollusks, you'll often notice that they're pink. They've got little pink spots on them. And if you look closely at those little pink spots, you'll see that they're a tiny little worm. And that's certainly the most common worm on the seashore. It's called spirula, and it makes a minute spiral white shell, just 2 or 3 millimeters across. But if you look at it closely, it extends beautiful bright red tentacles from the opening of that shell. And then when you cast a shadow over it, or you move the shell, it whips those back, and it has a little funnel-shaped trapdoor which it pulls back to block off the entrance.
I imagine it's quite useful living on the back of a gastropod or a hermit crab or something, because you get all the little food particles.
Not only does it get the food particles that, the dirty feeding, the crumbs from the master's table, but also then the gastropod moves around and moves to new areas. If the area gets silted up, it moves away. It keeps the worms in nice places. Another very interesting group of worms that you'll always find on the undersides of rocks are the scale worms. And what scale worms have done is they've taken the setae on their backs, the hairs on their backs, and they've adapted them to make little plates that sit on the back like shields. So each segment has one plate on the left and one plate on the right. And if you look at the worm, you have a whole row of plates running along the body. They remind me a bit of Roman legionnaires who used to hold their shields over their backs when they were protecting themselves from arrows. The shields are often very pretty. They're either beautifully colored or they're beautifully ornamented. So they're a very spectacular group of worms. So some polychaete worms are amazingly beautiful, like this one that has elongate tentacles on each segment, which it curls up into little spirals. So some people might find polychaete worms a little boring, maybe even a little bit gross, but they're actually one of the most diverse and one of the most interesting species on the seashore. You just got to get in a little bit closer. So next time you're at the shore, take a more careful look into the wonderful world of polychaete worms.